The conference room smelled like pine and betrayal. December 23rd, 4:47 p.m., and Chicago's skyline twinkled with holiday lights through Meridian Healthcare's executive windows. The annual budget meeting was supposed to be routine. It wasn't. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, 42, former trauma surgeon turned healthcare strategist. For 7 years, I'd built the systems that kept Meridian running, while Marcus Kane, CEO's son, Harvard MBA, zero hospital experience, collected credit and paychecks. Sarah's position is redundant, Marcus announced, not even looking at me. Effective immediately. The room went silent. Outside, Christmas carols played from the lobby speakers. Inside, I felt something crack that had nothing to do with the holiday spirit. He had no idea who was really paying his salary. 7 years earlier, I was pulling 80-hour weeks in Chicago General's trauma bay. Gunshot wounds, car accidents, overdoses. I'd seen it all. The work was brutal, but it mattered. Lives hung in the balance, and precision meant everything. I remember one particular night in November. A 6-car pileup on the Kennedy Expressway had flooded our ER with casualties. I was 3 surgeries deep when a 7-year-old girl arrived, barely breathing, her parents sobbing in the hallway. The operation was successful. I managed to stop the internal bleeding, repair the damage. But she died anyway, not from her injuries. She died because our blood bank had run out of her type, and the backup supply was stuck in a bureaucratic maze between departments. A child's life ended because of a spreadsheet error and poor communication protocols. That's when something broke, inside me. Not my surgical skills, those remained sharp as ever, but my faith in the system. I realized I could save 1,000 patients individually, but unless someone fixed the underlying chaos, 1,000 more would die needlessly. Then came the burnout. Not the exhaustion. I could handle that. It was watching patients die because the hospital's systems were broken. Equipment shortages, scheduling nightmares, supply chain disasters. I'd save someone in surgery only to lose them because the recovery ward was understaffed. That's when I met Dr. James Mitchell, a former colleague who'd transitioned to healthcare administration at Meridian. "Sarah," he said over coffee one rainy Tuesday. "We need someone who understands both sides, medical and operational. You could save more lives fixing our systems than you ever could in the OR." He was right. I joined Meridian as their first director of clinical operations. The pay was decent, but money wasn't the motivation. I wanted to build something that would outlast any single patient, any single surgery. But first, I had to prove myself all over again. My first project was the Emergency Response Protocol. Hospitals across the Midwest were hemorrhaging money on inefficient triage systems. I created a digital workflow that prioritized cases based on severity algorithms I'd learned from years of split-second life-or-death decisions in trauma. The resistance was immediate. Veteran nurses who'd been doing things their way for decades questioned every change. Hospital administrators worried about implementation costs. Even some doctors pushed back, afraid that algorithms would replace clinical judgment. I spent 6 months in the trenches, working alongside staff during every shift change, every crisis, every chaotic Saturday night. I modified protocols based on real-world feedback, adjusted algorithms when edge cases emerged, and proved that technology could enhance human judgment rather than replace it. The breakthrough came during a mass casualty event, a hotel fire downtown, that sent 43 people to our ER simultaneously. Using the old system, chaos would have reigned. Instead, my protocols automatically sorted patients by severity, assigned resources optimally, and coordinated with other area hospitals to prevent overload. We saved 7 lives that night that would have been lost under the old system. Not maybe, definitely. The data was clear. Implementation took 18 months of 16-hour days, but the results spoke for themselves. 40% reduction in wait times, 60% improvement in patient outcomes, 25% decrease in operational costs. More importantly, patient satisfaction scores jumped from 6.2 to 8.9 out of 10. That's when the stock options started paying off. Meridian's value skyrocketed as hospitals nationwide licensed my protocols. Suddenly, I wasn't just drawing a salary, I was earning serious wealth from the company's success. The Chicago Tribune ran a feature story, "From Scalpel to Software: How One Doctor is Revolutionizing Healthcare." Industry journals published my research. Conference invitations poured in. But then Marcus arrived and everything changed. Richard Kane, Meridian's CEO, was a genuinely brilliant leader who'd built the company from a small Chicago clinic into a healthcare empire. He understood operations, respected expertise, and never claimed credit for work he didn't do. I'd worked directly with Richard on multiple projects, and he always treated me as an equal partner in strategic decisions. His son Marcus was the opposite of everything Richard represented. Marcus waltzed in 3 years ago with his MBA still fresh and his resume full of consulting buzzwords. Harvard Business School, 2 years at McKinsey doing healthcare consulting, and a TED Talk about disrupting traditional medical hierarchies that had garnered 50,000 views. He'd never worked a hospital shift, never seen a patient crash, never had to make decisions where someone's life hung in the balance. But he spoke the language that boards loved: optimization, disruption, lean methodology, stakeholder value creation. Within 6 months, Marcus was promoted to VP of Strategic Operations, my boss, despite having zero healthcare experience. The irony wasn't lost on me. The trauma surgeon with 7 years of operational success was now reporting to someone who'd probably faint at the sight of blood. The warning signs appeared immediately. During his first all-hands meeting, Marcus unveiled his vision for Meridian's future. He stood before 200 healthcare professionals and declared, "We need to stop thinking like a hospital and start thinking like a tech company." Dr. Lisa Park, our chief medical officer, raised her hand. "Marcus, we're not a tech company. We're responsible for human lives." Marcus flashed that smile, the one that said he'd already considered this obvious objection and found it quaint. That's exactly the kind of traditional thinking that's holding us back. Apple doesn't think of itself as a computer company. Amazon doesn't think of itself as a bookstore. We need to transcend the limitations of legacy healthcare thinking. The room fell silent. These were people who'd dedicated their careers to healing, who'd sacrificed family time and personal comfort to serve patients. Being told they needed to transcend their life's work by someone who'd never held a stethoscope wasn't just insulting, it was dangerous. But Richard Kane wasn't in that meeting. He was in Germany, finalizing a partnership with a European medical device manufacturer. And in his absence, Marcus began systematically dismantling everything that made Meridian great. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The first red flag came during a team meeting in March. I'd presented a proposal to expand our protocols to rural hospitals, communities where my systems could literally mean the difference between life and death. The data was compelling. Rural hospitals had 23% higher mortality rates for emergency cases, primarily due to inefficient triage and resource allocation. Marcus barely glanced at the 60-page proposal before dismissing it. "Rural expansion doesn't align with our urban-focused growth strategy," he said, using words that meant nothing and everything at the same time. Dr. Lisa Park, our chief medical officer and someone I deeply respected, tried to intervene. "Marcus, Sarah's protocols have already saved thousands of lives. Rural hospitals desperately need these systems." Marcus smiled that particular smile men use when they're about to mansplain something to a room full of experts. I understand the emotional appeal, but we need to focus on scalable revenue streams. Rural markets offer limited ROI potential. Emotional appeal. As if saving lives was a feelings-based decision rather than a data-driven imperative. But the real blow came when he pulled up his own slide deck, clearly prepared in advance. Instead, I'm proposing we pivot toward premium urban markets. Concierge medicine, elective procedures, cosmetic applications of our triage technology. The room went dead silent. He wanted to use emergency room protocols, systems designed to save lives in crisis situations, for cosmetic surgery scheduling. Dr. Park stood up. Marcus, that's not what this technology was designed for. Sarah built these systems to help the sickest, most vulnerable patients get faster, better care. And that's exactly why it's perfect for high-end applications, Marcus replied, completely missing the point. If it can handle life or death situations, it can certainly optimize spa appointment scheduling. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just corporate stupidity, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of everything I'd worked to build. That's when I made a choice that would later save my career and destroy his. By 2021, my stock options had generated substantial wealth. Meridian's success, built largely on systems I'd created, had made me financially independent. But watching Marcus systematically undermine patient care for profit margins made me realize that money without influence was just numbers in a bank account. So I did something unusual. I started buying more Meridian stock, not through my employee account, but through a private investment fund I'd established. Chen Capital Holdings, registered in Delaware, managed through a trust, completely anonymous to Meridian's board. The process took months to set up properly. I worked with lawyers in New York, financial advisors in San Francisco, and accountants who specialized in private equity structures. Every detail had to be perfect, every legal requirement meticulously satisfied. Over 2 years, I acquired a significant stake in the company. Not enough to control it, but enough to influence major decisions. The fund generated substantial income, which I used strategically. I began making anonymous donations to Meridian's operational budget, specifically targeting departments that Marcus kept trying to cut. The pediatric ICU that Marcus wanted to right-size? My fund donated $800,000 for new equipment. The rural outreach program he'd canceled? I contributed $1.2 million to resurrect it through a community partnership initiative. And yes, I funded executive salaries too, including his. The irony was perfect. Marcus Kane, who spent his days dismissing my expertise and undermining my projects, was literally being paid by the woman he treated as irrelevant. His $180,000 annual salary, his health benefits, his stock options, all partially funded by my anonymous contributions to the company's executive compensation pool. But I kept this secret locked away, waiting for the moment when it might matter. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his reign of corporate destruction. He canceled 3 more of my projects, citing resource optimization. He hired his MBA classmates into senior positions, creating an echo chamber of business school groupthink. He started requiring all clinical decisions to be validated by his strategy team, none of whom had medical backgrounds. The final straw came in November, just a month before he fired me. Marcus announced his masterpiece, Project Phoenix, a complete restructuring of Meridian's clinical operations based on industry best practices he'd learned during a weekend executive retreat in Aspen. The plan was breathtaking in its stupidity. He wanted to eliminate redundant nursing positions, outsource patient care coordination to a call center in India, and replace experienced medical technicians with digital solutions powered by artificial intelligence. Dr. Park requested a private meeting with Richard Kane, but Marcus intercepted the request. "Dad's busy with international partnerships," he told her. "I'm handling all operational decisions now." That's when I realized Richard Kane had no idea what his son was doing to the company he'd built. December 23rd arrived with a Chicago blizzard and Marcus's worst instincts. The board meeting was supposed to be a routine year-end review, but Marcus had prepared a surprise. The conference room was decorated for the holidays. A small Christmas tree in the corner, garland along the windows, the scent of pine mixing, with coffee and tension. Outside, the snow was falling so heavily that flights at O'Hare were being canceled. Richard Kane was supposed to attend virtually from London, where he was finalizing the European partnership deal. But the time zone difference and technical difficulties meant Marcus was running the meeting solo, exactly what he'd been hoping for. "I've identified significant cost savings opportunities," he announced, pulling up a PowerPoint slide titled Operational Efficiency Initiative. My name was at the top of the cut list, followed by Dr. Park's pediatric research program and 3 veteran nurses who'd been with Meridian for over 15 years. Sarah's role overlaps with existing functions, he continued, clearly enjoying himself. Her projects, while well-intentioned, don't generate measurable ROI. In today's healthcare environment, we can't afford sentiment over strategy. Well-intentioned. The phrase landed like a slap. Systems that had saved thousands of lives, protocols that had generated millions in revenue, algorithms that had revolutionized emergency care across the Midwest, reduced to well-intentioned. Dr. Park tried to object. "Marcus, Sarah's work is the foundation of our clinical excellence ratings. You can't just—" "I can and I am," Marcus interrupted. "The decision's been made. This isn't a debate. It's an announcement." He turned to face me directly, and I saw something in his eyes that went beyond professional disagreement. This was personal. He'd been waiting for this moment, planning it, savoring it. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of the cruelty he'd been suppressing for months. "Your position is eliminated effectively immediately. Security will escort you out." The room fell silent, except for the wind howling against the windows. Through the glass, I could see Christmas lights twinkling in office buildings across downtown Chicago. Somewhere below, holiday music played, cheerful and oblivious to the corporate violence happening 40 floors above. I didn't argue, I didn't plead, I didn't give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, I smiled. "Marcus," I said, standing and gathering my notebook, "you might want to check your funding sources before you make any other dramatic announcements." He frowned, confused. For all his business school education, he'd never bothered to understand how Meridian's finances actually worked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing important," I replied, pulling on my coat. "Merry Christmas." Dr. Park caught my eye as I walked toward the door. I could see the questions there, the anger, the disbelief. I gave her the smallest nod, a promise that this wasn't over. As security walked me to the elevator, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to my attorney. "Execute the reveal protocol. Full disclosure by December 26th. Marcus thought he'd ended my story. He had no idea he'd just triggered the beginning of his Christmas Eve passed quietly, but not peacefully. I spent it at home, reviewing legal documents and watching the snow accumulate outside my Lincoln Park apartment. My attorney, David Morrison, a sharp corporate lawyer I'd worked with on the investment fund setup, called twice to confirm details. "Sarah," he said during our second conversation, "once we file these disclosures, there's no taking it back. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked out at the Christmas lights reflecting off the snow-covered trees. "David, I've watched that kid destroy everything his father built, fire good people for no reason, and treat patient care like a line item on a budget. Yeah, I'm sure." "Understood. The filings will go through first thing December 26th. Christmas." Morning brought an unexpected call. Dr. Park, calling from her family celebration in Wisconsin. "Sarah," she said, her voice tight with worry, "I need to tell you something. Richard Kane flew back from London last night. He's furious about what happened in that meeting. My pulse quickened. How furious? He called me at 6 a.m. on Christmas morning. Apparently, someone in London tipped him off about the meeting. He had no idea Marcus was planning to fire you. This changed everything. Richard Kane finding out about my termination before my revelation could complicate things significantly. There's something else, Dr. Park continued. Richard's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. He specifically asked if I knew how to reach you. I made a decision. Tell him I'll be there. And Lisa? Don't mention our conversation to anyone, especially not Marcus. By Christmas afternoon, David had filed all the necessary paperwork. The disclosure hit the system like a digital bomb, automatically triggering notifications to Meridian's board, their legal team, and the SEC. The revelation that Dr. Sarah Chen, recently terminated employee, was also the controlling shareholder of Chen Capital Holdings, Meridian's largest anonymous donor, sent shockwaves through the financial and healthcare industries. By evening, my phone was ringing nonstop. Financial reporters, industry analysts, headhunters, everyone wanted to know the story behind the story. Ignored them all. There was only one conversation that mattered now. On December 26th, Richard Kane's assistant called me directly. Not Marcus, Richard himself. The message was simple. Emergency board meeting. Your immediate presence requested. I arrived at Meridian's headquarters at 2 p.m., snow still falling, the building mostly empty except for security and the executive team. The same conference room where Marcus had fired me 3 days earlier now hosted a very different kind of meeting. Richard Kane sat at the head of the table, documents spread before him. Marcus sat beside his father, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. Sarah, Richard began, his voice careful and measured. We've received some interesting information about Chen Capital Holdings. Sat down calmly, folding my hands. What would you like to know? For starters, Dr. Park interjected, clearly struggling between amazement and disbelief. Why didn't you tell us you owned 12% of the company? Because it wasn't relevant to my job performance, I replied. My role was to build clinical systems that saved lives and generated value. The fact that I also invested in the company's success seemed like a personal matter. Marcus finally found his voice. You've been secretly funding executive salaries while working here as an employee? Not secretly. Anonymously. There's a difference. I opened my own folder, pulling out a detailed financial breakdown. Chen Capital Holdings has contributed $2.3 million to Meridian's operational budget over the past 2 years. Those contributions were specifically earmarked for departments that were facing cuts. Richard studied the documents. Including executive compensation. I looked directly at Marcus. Your salary, your benefits package, your stock options. Approximately 30% of your total compensation has been funded by my investment contributions. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus's face cycled through several colors before settling on a shade of red that matched the Christmas decorations still hanging in the lobby. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. And now that my employment has been terminated, I'm exercising my right as a significant stakeholder to call for a comprehensive review of executive performance and strategic direction. Richard Kane was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He immediately understood the implications. Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your termination was perfectly legal, I interrupted, and perfectly informative. It demonstrated exactly the kind of decision-making that's been undermining this company's potential. What happened next played out like a corporate thriller, except the ending was better than fiction. Within 48 hours, the board launched a full investigation into Marcus's management decisions. They discovered that over the past 18 months, he'd systematically undermined or canceled 7 major projects I'd developed, projects that would have generated an estimated $40 million in additional revenue. The rural hospital expansion he'd dismissed as emotional appeal. 3 competing firms had successfully implemented similar programs, capturing market share that should have been Meridian's. The advanced triage algorithms he'd called unnecessarily complex, they'd since been adopted by hospital systems across Europe, generating millions in licensing fees that could have been ours. Marcus hadn't just fired me. He'd been sabotaging the company's growth while being partially paid by my own investments. The board meeting on January 3rd was swift and decisive. Marcus Kane was removed from his position as VP of Strategic Operations. Not fired, Richard Kane protected his son from complete humiliation, but reassigned to special projects, which everyone understood to be corporate purgatory. But the story doesn't end with Marcus's downfall. 3 days after Marcus's reassignment, Richard Kane appeared at my apartment with an offer I hadn't expected. "Sarah," he said, standing in my doorway with snow still melting on his coat, "I made a mistake. Not just in allowing Marcus to fire you, but in not recognizing your full value to this company." He handed me a formal offer letter. Chief Operating Officer. Full board seat. Equity package that recognized both my operational contributions and my significant investment in the company's future. "But more importantly," Richard continued, "I want to know if you're willing to help me fix what my son broke." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I invited him in, made coffee, and asked him a single question. "Are you ready to prioritize patient outcomes over profit margins?" His answer was immediate. "That's exactly what we need to do." 6 months later, Meridian Healthcare launched the largest rural expansion program in company history. The systems I'd developed were implemented across 47 hospitals in underserved communities. The revenue impact exceeded projections by 180%. Marcus, meanwhile, spent his special projects assignment studying healthcare policy at Northwestern University. Whether he learned anything meaningful remained to be seen, but at least he wasn't making decisions that affected patient care. People often ask me why I didn't reveal my ownership stake earlier, why I let Marcus treat me as expendable when I could have wielded my financial influence from the beginning. The answer is simple. I wanted to build something real, something that would last regardless of corporate politics or family dynamics. The moment I started using wealth as a weapon, I would have become just another rich person demanding respect instead of earning it. Marcus fired me because he saw me as powerless. He was wrong, but not for the reasons he later discovered. My real power wasn't the stock I owned or the money I'd invested. It was the systems I'd built, the lives I'd saved, the value I'd created through expertise and dedication rather than birthright and connections. The anonymous funding wasn't about control or leverage. It was about ensuring that good work could continue even when bad leaders tried to stop it. In the end, Marcus learned what many people in positions they haven't earned eventually discover. Arrogance is a luxury you can only afford when you're actually indispensable. And the moment you fire the person keeping your lights on, the darkness comes quickly. Today, Meridian Healthcare is the fastest-growing hospital system in the Midwest. Our protocols have been implemented in over 200 facilities worldwide. Patient outcomes have improved dramatically, and the company's value has tripled since that December meeting when Marcus thought he was ending my career. Marcus still works at Meridian, now in a research capacity where his MBA training is better suited to long-term analysis rather than operational decisions. We maintain a professional relationship, though I doubt he'll ever fully understand why his father's company succeeded, despite his efforts to redirect it. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best way to protect what you've built is to invest in it quietly, support it anonymously, and trust that excellence will outlast ego every time. The next time someone tries to fire you 2 days before Christmas, remember this. They might control your job, but they don't control your value. And if you've built something real, something meaningful, something that matters. No one can take that away, no matter what their last name happens to be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's proving that competence will always trump connections, and that the person they underestimated was actually the one keeping their world running all along. Merry Christmas, Marcus. Thanks for the motivation. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.